afternoon, delegates. The business session in the afternoon is now open. I'd like to introduce to you the Mayor of Pittsburgh, Bill Peduto, to come up and bring some greetings.
Thank you, Loretta. So, show of hands, how many people, this is the first time you've been to Pittsburgh? All right, that's what I like to see. And of those hands in the air, how many of you thought you were going to see rusted old steel mills falling into dirty rivers? All right, come on, be honest. Well, welcome to Pittsburgh. I hope, we're so honored to be able to welcome you. My good friend Nina from PFT 400 has been waiting for this. I know that our teachers have as well. So what I'm going to do, how many history teachers here? All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get revenge for all those students. I'm going to give you a 3-minute history of Pittsburgh. And most of it's true. So, where we are now was first settled by the French Europeans. And they came here and they said, hello, bonjour, we are here, and this is as far as the New World will go. And then came a young major in the Virginia militia, and he marched over the Laurel Highlands, and he said, not so fast, we want this for Britain. And in the middle of the night on his way back, there was a skirmish, and there was a young ensign, French ensign named Jumonville, who was killed. And thus began the 7-Year War, the French and Indian War. They loved us so much, they fought the First World War for us. And the British would win, and we would become Fort Pitt, the western frontier. It wouldn't be for 30, 40 years later that after the American Revolution had settled, that a couple guys got in a boat down by Heinz Field, and their names were Lewis and Clark. And they discovered Ohio. No, they discovered the rest, right? From sea to shining sea, manifest destiny, this great nation. And they said, but who's gonna build it? And they looked over their shoulders and they said, Pittsburgh. Because long before it was steel, it was natural resources. It was coal that was discovered along the Mon River. It was glass, and then it was iron, and then it was steel, and then it was aluminum. And Pittsburgh built America. We built every skyscraper and every bridge in every city in this country. But we did something else. We created air that was dangerous to breathe. We created water that was poisonous to drink. And we created the greatest disparity between the haves and the have-nots, between my grandfathers who worked in the mills and those that managed and owned them. But we did what Pittsburghers do. We rolled up our sleeves and we went to work. We created the first Clean Air Act in American history, 20 years before Congress ever considered it, 30 years before there was an EPA. We worked together as a community to clean our water. And we organized in the mines and the mills. And we not only built America, we built the middle class. In Pittsburgh, in Detroit, in Cleveland, where unions started, where unions became the backdrop of what would become the American dream. And you know what? Pittsburgh prospered. We were one of the wealthiest cities in this country. We were the 3rd largest corporate center in America. New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh. And then came 1979. I started high school. The Pirates won the World Series. It's been a long time. Remember Willie Stargell, We Are Family? Steelers won their 4th Super Bowl in 6 years. And 1979, Pittsburgh died. We died. The economic heart was ripped out of us. We lost more people in the 1980s than New Orleans lost after Katrina, and they never came back home. We had triple the unemployment Detroit has today, 19%, and that's after everybody had left. And even our city budget 20% of it was just to pay debt because we didn't have a tax base. So we just had to borrow higher debt than New York City when it went bankrupt. And there were no federal bailouts for us. We had to do what Pittsburghers do. We rolled up our sleeves and we went to work. And today you see that city. Today you see the seeds that were planted. Today you see the commitment of what people can do when they invest in people. And we have gone from the city of steel to the city of learning, where we invest in our children, where every public school student gets a $20,000 scholarship to attend college or to be able to go to technical training. And where we're committed, where every 3 and 4-year-old will have universal access to pre-K education. We have built a new system within education of this city that involves everyone, from the corporations to the foundations to the large institutions. And we understand that if we're going to get to that next great part, from that dusty little western frontier town to that industrial giant, to the collapse, to the rebound, to the next Pittsburgh, it will be one that provides opportunity for everyone. An economy based not on our old economy where there were winners and losers, but an economy based on everyone. And the key to that is education. So it is my honor to welcome you here, to say that in this city as you walk around, I hope you feel that energy. I hope you understand that commitment. I hope you see what a city that believes in organized labor and in its own success can be. Because when you put people first, anything is possible.
Before you leave.
Hey.
How are you?
Doing great. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So, what do you all think about this convention in Pittsburgh? So, we have been welcomed by so many of the retailers, the restaurants. They have all sorts of signs saying, "Welcome AFT," all the signs around the convention center. We've thanked Nina before, but we really want to thank you, Mayor, for the rolling out the red and the blue and the carpet to us. Thank you very, very, very much.
And the black and the gold.
Exactly. Oh, excuse me. And the black and the gold.
Thanks, Andy. Great to see you. If you need anything while you're here, let me know.
As soon as I realized that I wasn't flooding, I talked to one of my friends and we decided that we were going to see if we could volunteer at some of the shelters. And we made a Facebook post.
Kristen reached out to us and asked if we would publicize her post, and we sent it out to our membership. And the teachers started flooding into them that wanted to help.
We were able to split up and make day camps for kids that were not going to be able to return to school right away.
One teacher decided to bring the classroom to them.
The kids would get really excited when we went in to like the George R. Brown. They recognized our school ID badges. They would ask if we're going to be their teacher.
And just to give their families, their parents, a break to start applying for FEMA assistance and resources that they needed to try to find a way out of the shelter and back into a safe home.
Special education is my area. I was specifically seeking out children that might have disabilities or challenges, just knowing that being in a shelter is chaotic enough on its own. And so I brought sensory items and noise-reducing headphones and different things for them.
When the kids were in the shelter, it was tough.
I think it really displays that teaching is a service.
They're caretakers and they often put other people before themselves.
Many people would volunteer all day with kids, go home and clean up their own house. The whole teaching community in Houston just kind of wrapped their arms around the kids.
That sense of community, that sense of caring, that sense of understanding what a real union is about really is the silver lining in the clouds of the storm.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kristen McClintock.
This is very overwhelming and unexpected, and very appreciative. And I get very emotional thinking about everything that's happened the last year in Houston and how much HFT has really supported the whole community, the teaching community, as well as all of the students. And teaching really is a community service. I firmly believe that. And we wouldn't be able to do this without the help of our union. And so I'm just going to end saying that we are Houston strong and we are union strong.
Thank you. Well, we are so proud of you. Congratulations. You're welcome. Everybody, let's give it up one more time for Kristen McClintock and everyone who worked alongside of her in Houston. So in our morning session, we heard from one of those 300 AFT members, Johanna Lopez, who is running for office in Orange County, Florida. We have another member we'd like to show up for this afternoon. Brandon Johnson, CTU Local 1 member and middle school teacher, turned his critique into action. He ran for office on a simple platform: tax wealthy corporations and the rich, redistribute it to communities and public services where the resources are needed the most. And he won. In Donald Trump's America, Bruce Rauner's Illinois, and Rahm Emanuel's Chicago, Brandon ran on a Great Society platform calling for the return of big government and the redistribution of wealth. And he won. If a middle school teacher and union organizer can win in Chicago and Cook County, Illinois, we can win everywhere. Please welcome to our stage Brandon Johnson, man of faith, husband, father, CTU Local 1 member, middle school teacher, Cook County Commissioner. Yeah. All right. I hope your son's game's going well.
Wow. This is, I don't know if you all are standing because I won or because she mentioned that I was a middle school teacher and you feel sorry for me. And let me just say, if you're sitting next to a middle school teacher, give them a hug and $100 and tell them you still got 6 more weeks of summer. It's gonna be okay. Keep calm. Because you all know it takes a special kind of person to teach the most strangest human beings on the planet. Come on. That's right. Let me just say, of course, thank you to all of you. I'm always amazed and humbled by public accommodation workers, particularly teachers, because clearly you all really love professional development training. The fact that so many of you have returned at 2 o'clock says an awful lot about you all's commitment to meetings. And of course, Randy and Loretta, thank you so much for the introduction. Marianne, I mean, I am deeply humbled by this moment. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say that this moment that we are in right now politically has been brought to you by one of the most dynamic members of the AFT, and that's our dear sister, Karen Lewis. So the difficult task of being a public school teacher in Chicago was not even so much the tasks of the day-to-day work. You all know every single day we get up and we move into our spaces with the expectation that our students will have more opportunities than we had, and that our neighborhoods would reflect those opportunities. Unfortunately, in this political climate, you have structures that are in place that are preventing those opportunities from manifesting. See, I teach in a community in Cabrini Green, USA, where every single day my students woke up to gross disinvestment all around them. The same cranes that were destroying their public housing were the same cranes that were building expensive homes for the 1%. That this is the political environment in which I taught in. It's the environment, unfortunately, many of us teach and work in. One of the toughest moments I ever had in my political career as a public school teacher is a particular day where you all know when you put those dynamic lessons together and you differentiate, you set up stations and groups, and none of that works. So I had this amazing lesson prepared and planned, and let me just say, it was chaos in that room. And I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do as a teacher to make this the best education experience that our students could have. And my students were missing me and I was missing them. And when you teach middle school, you can't give kids time out. You have to take a time out. And so I had this little space in my classroom, and I sat in this space, and my students knew that if I sat in this particular chair and gave myself a time out, then we know it's time to refocus because Mr. Johnson is really upset. And so I sat down, I gave myself a time out, and it worked. They got quiet. And one of my students raised their hand, and I said, put your hand down, because I want to tell you about yourselves real quick. And I said, what is most disappointing about your behavior right now is the fact that many of you are beginning to embrace the prophecy that's being spoken against you. That the political environment in which they're being raised in, they begin to absorb that. And one of my students raised her hand. She says, Mr. Johnson, I want to tell you what the problem is. And there's nothing worse than a 13-year-old girl telling you what she thinks the problem is. And she said, Mr. Johnson, the problem is you shouldn't be teaching here. She said, you should be teaching at a good school. Thank you. That wasn't in my notes. My dad's side of the family is very sensitive, so I apologize for that. Thank you. She said, Mr. Johnson, you should be teaching at a good school. I sat in my classroom for hours, just wondering what type of political environment are we in which a particular age group where students are still dreaming of what's possible. But even as their realities begin to set in, that is not the kind of environment our students should be subject to. And I wanted to do something about it. And unfortunately, we have a political environment, you all, that has set up winners and losers. And this political environment has been set up by all political parties that have chosen the interest of the rich and powerful over our neighborhoods and our students. And it's enough of that. We live in a political climate right now where the economy has favored the rich, and those at the very top have secured so many resources, and to the extent in which many of them still want more. The richest man on the planet right now, who runs Amazon, is expecting $2 billion in tax incentives as black women and brown women beg for their jobs, as schools are being closed across this country. We have had enough of this economy. Now here's the encouraging news, and I'll attempt to close with this. And beware, my father's a pastor, so I'll close 3 times. And he's Kojic, so if somebody get on the keyboard, we just might have church. We've been here before. We've seen this before. This is not the first time this union or our economy has had to face these type of challenges. Whether it was Dred Scott or Plessy and now Janice, we've seen this before. And for the record, Janice can go kick rocks, all of his privilege. And we've defeated it. Why? We defeated it because we found our voices in these political moments, where we found our voices at a time when our economy needed the working class to find it the most. The encouraging news in this moment is not only can we win and defeat the political structures that are causing havoc and harm across this country, not only can we defeat them, but we can defeat them in an emphatic way. See, I ran for Cook County Commissioner on a very simple value, that those who actually deserve public accommodations, that those services should be expanded, and those that do the work should be protected, and the rich people need to pay for it. Our task now is not just to talk about our values, but it's to go back into our respective spaces and talk to our neighbors, talk to our members, and begin to organize, get them to stand up and fight for the interests of the working class, that we together as a union of professionals, can take down the interests of the corporations that just got a tax break from Donald Trump. We can take on these corporations that continue to profit off of our misery. We can run on a message that sets the course of the next generation, that we as a people deserve the interests that our ancestors can only dream of. We're in that moment today. I ran for public office because I believe it is about time that working class families stand up and fight for our values. And here's the thing, you all. Here's the thing, I promise you, I'm closing here.
Go for it, Brandon. Just go for it.
Second close. We have to be prepared to do the hard work. This doesn't happen overnight. The attacks that we're facing are real. We are seeing right now extreme poverty across this country, police brutality. You are seeing families ripped apart. You are literally seeing Great Depression unemployment numbers across this country. We have to be not afraid to actually say out loud what our values are. And when they tell us no, that is when we find our strength. I'm one of 10. We were told no all the time in my house. That was just the word people said before you asked again. When we see the challenge that is facing in front of us, we have to be prepared to fight. And here's the good news, you all. If we run on the values of expanding public services to those that need them, expanding the interests and the rights of workers, and demanding that those at the very top, we can win. No matter where you are in this country, I command you now to run. Run for office. Run until the drinking water in Michigan is safe. Run until housing in New York and Los Angeles is affordable. Run until the neighborhoods in Chicago are safe. Run until Arizona, Oklahoma, and West Virginia have fully funded schools. Run until the rights of workers are protected. Run until there's a livable wage for every worker. Run until women's reproductive rights are protected, respected, and guaranteed. Run until Black Lives Matter. Run until the interests of working class families are prioritized. Run until there is an AFT member in every single level of government, from the city to the county to the state to the White House. God bless you. Thank you.
Brandon for president.
What do we say? Not one penny. I love Kansas, and I'm here to talk to you about what happened there with a very similar tax plan to what they're talking about doing.
Larger classes, more potholes, less police.
I am so thankful that we have employee unions to stand up for what's right for working people, because as far as I can see, that is the main and singular voice we have for telling the truth and shedding the light on the problems that we are looking at.
I came because I am so very appalled at the budget cuts that have been proposed. My school would be severely impacted because of an increase in class size if these cuts go through.
I think they need to hear from actual teachers in the classroom.
Those things that they already had, not taken away from them, not less.
I'm visiting Shelley Moore Capito to let them know what's going on in their hometowns and their states.
Systemic racism and homophobia and religious bigotry and climate destruction. This is about our humanity.
We fight for democracy and justice. So let me ask you, will you fight for dignity and respect?
We grew up with the only comprehension of ourselves is that we were illegal. Even though there was fear initially, and when you look at this challenge, knowing that you're representing not only yourself, but hundreds of thousands of Black undocumented immigrants behind you.
Those stories are powerful, and that's what gets people on our side to advocate with us to pass the DREAM Act.
Our children depend on it. We want to show solidarity to all of the people that can't fight and can't speak for themselves.
The amount of support I have received from my union is astounding. Like, it brings tears to my eyes sometimes because they care. They're here. They're fighting for it.
Pues muchas gracias les doy a ustedes y a ellos por su apoyo.
Carmela Hernandez escaped brutality of drug cartel in Mexico. I want to make a request to ICE. Please open our doors for this family.
Our voice is very powerful, and when we speak out, people listen.
As we walk over to the UN, who will receive this complaint, imagine toddlers being imprisoned in cages.
No más, no more.
This is going to take action like this after action after action. This is a fight for the soul of our nation.
This is the only thing that makes a difference when all of us in the United States come together and say, stop this inhumanity.
With the rollback of the Affordable Care Act, we need to all stand up and use our collective voice to advocate for what's right.
A cut to Medicaid impacts every public school student. It is irresponsible in any nation to remove a child from medical neglect and then return them to that same situation.
Inadequate staffing is detrimental to patient and worker safety.
I'm out here for the patients that I want to turn more, I want to ambulate more, I want to walk with and talk with. The patient ratio is high. It's hard to get to do all of that.
And we have to erase the racism that still plagues this country. We have to stand up and say Black Lives Matter. This generation version of I am a man.
We must use this moment to grow our movement, to enlarge our tent, to rise again for jobs and justice.
Hello, good afternoon. Oh, should I? Go. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Leanne Graham, and I'm a paraprofessional, a proud member. Thank you. A proud member of the AFT and the local UFT. Before I begin, I just want to encourage us to give Mr. Brandon Johnson just one more round of applause. Firstly, thank you to the AFT for this honor of speaking today. Many thanks to Randy, Loretta Johnson, and Mary Catherine Ricker. You all are truly the examples of caring, fighting, showing up, and voting. And thank you to each and every one of you in this room today who show up for your students in school. My friend and colleague, Eric Mysura, once told me, Be gentle with the do-gooders. Because for a long time, I did not understand how immigrants can suffer under an oppressor, and it appeared that no one seemed to care. I had to come to the realization that many people just did not know what was happening. And once these atrocities were brought to the forefront, people stood up. They stepped in. And then it was up to us, the activists, to welcome all of you to the fight, to welcome the do-gooders. However, a narrative has been spun that all immigrants are Mexican and vile, and this is a completely false narrative, and it excludes the Black immigrant. The idea of one group of people searching for what we as humans all want, a place of foundation, a place for success for our families, and an assurance of hope. That people seeking out urgency for a better life were minimized to nothing more than criminals. This is an appalling statement. Immigration is an issue, yes. It is also a Black issue, and it is not now just beginning, and it is far from over. So I urge you, the do-gooders, to speak out, to use your voice to help immigrants who are drowning in a sea of racist, biased rhetoric, to stand hand in strength with immigrants like me who speak loudly and with conviction of every mile we have traveled seeking a better life. For me, for our future, for humanity, whether Black or brown, we have value as immigrants. We are someone. I know that us, the do-gooders, we can win this fight. As a matter of fact, we will win this fight. But we must do it together with organizations like Undocu Black. We are certain that winning comes when all immigrants, Black immigrants included, are protected under the umbrella of freedom that is fought so fiercely for immigrants who are not of color. We must do this together. And I know immigration is not a one-step process, but for humanity, for our future, we must immerse ourselves in the school of action. Because if we as AFT members, if we care, if we fight, if we show up and we vote with a wholeness and together, indeed, I know we will win. Thank you.
I want to actually bring someone up and then see if we can do the special order of business after Jose speaks on the separating of children from their families or their parents. Leanne's story. Aren't these activists that are coming up to the podium amazing? And Brandon, by the way, is an activist as well. The issue of immigration is not simply one where we are fighting for the rights of others. We are fighting for the rights of our own members, and we are fighting in some ways every single day for the rights of our children who come into school, who have no idea sometimes whether their own parents will be home at night. It started in Alabama a few years ago with the then governor, and it has now continued through the United States of America with the current administration in terms of what happens with immigrants. The stories are abhorrent. And we will be doing a whole bunch of things, including making sure our members and our leaders and the school systems for which we work understand that Plyler v. Doe, that legal opinion from several years ago, decades ago in fact, means that children, regardless of their status, are entitled, have the freedom of public education. And we will be doing the kinds of things we need to do as sanctuary, as Jericho walks, in these kind of ways over the course of the beginning of the fall. But right now, there is an immigration issue that has cut at the core of all of us. I find it mind-boggling to think that anyone who can utter the word family values could actually engage in the abhorrent, unconscionable, inhumane, cruel policy of the separation of a child from his or her parent. I'm sure that people have watched, like, for example, the one-year-old sitting on the judge's bench, having to defend himself, or the situations of children 8 months old, 9 months old, being dehydrated, or that care workers were not allowed to touch children, or that children being in cages, or the fact that most of us, including public representatives, were not even allowed to see the conditions in which children were held. And this is the United States of America last month. And so I know sometimes talking about immigration is not a popular issue. But as with every human justice issue, we cannot be silent in the face of this gross inhumanity. And so, and it's not simply because most of us in this room, you don't actually need to have your DNA taken to know that most of us in this room come from other places in the world. And those who are native to the United States have been discriminated against even more. So we are a nation of immigrants, and we cannot pull the ladder of opportunity out from under us. And it means that those of us with standing, with status, who no one is going to look to see if we have a green card or a license, we must, we must stand up in this issue for our kids and for our families. And so we went to the border. Mary Catherine and I both traveled to Tornillo, Texas. And on our trip, and you saw from Louis earlier on today, with many of our members from El Paso, Ross Moore is, I think, still in the House, who is the president of our El Paso local. Our Socorro local was with us as well. We traveled to Tornillo. You saw this. We were joined by some of the nation's most prominent faith leaders, human rights activists, as you saw, like Dolores Huerta, like Sister Simone, both of which wanted to be with us today, but could not. We held a rally outside the courthouse where immigration cases are heard in El Paso, and then led by the clergy who were with us, including my partner, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, the head of the Hebrew Union College Rabbinical School, and Sister Simone, and many others. We attempted to deliver clean clothes and books and teddy bears to children who had been ripped from their parents and were being held in cages. Of course, we were turned away. But we were joined by not just clergy and not just our activists, but by activists in the broader Latino and Hispanic community, one of whom was Jose Calderon, who has also been working with us in the fight for stability and normalcy and resources in Puerto Rico. And Jose was there with us in Texas. He's the head of the Hispanic Federation. Jose was also with us when we brought a formal complaint to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, asking the UN to serve as the moral check on the US's cruel and torturous separation policies. He is someone who we have walked the walk with in so many fights. He now leads the Hispanic Federation, one of the nation's premier national organizations dealing with the needs of Latino and Latinx families. He's a Dominican-born New Yorker, a proud father of 2 girls, and he has expanded the Federation's reach in the years that he has been the head of it through the United States, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. Together with Jose and the Hispanic Federation, we have not simply fought on these family separation issues. We've not simply fought on the Puerto Rican issues. We have fought to protect dreamers. We have fought to promote voter registration in the Hispanic community. And we essentially are fighting these civil rights battles together. It is my honor and privilege to bring up Jose Calderon.
The way we roll these days. So good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Randy, particularly, thank you for your amazing leadership and really, again, your friendship, which empowers us every day to do the work we do. But before I start my formal remarks, I do want to thank Leanne, who just spoke, right? Leanne, who is undocumented, right? Of African roots, and that's an important story to tell because immigration is not just a Latino issue, right? It's an issue that impacts all of us, right? So thank you, Leanne, for your courage and bravery. And Brandon Johnson, wow, right? Geez, I remember another young, good-looking brother from Chicago who got you fired up. So I am saying what Randy said. You know, President Johnson, I know we had Bernie this morning, but, you know, why not? Thank you again for everything that the AFT does. You know, Randy mentioned we've worked together on just about everything. Really just, there is no one issue here in this country that we have not fought together with the AFT to protect healthcare access, to promote voter participation in our communities, advance progressive educational reforms, fight against school closures in Puerto Rico, which is awful what's happening in Puerto Rico now. And then when our brothers and sisters on the island needed clean drinking water, we worked hand in hand with the AFT to make sure that our people in Puerto Rico had clean drinking water. It's amazing, right? Yes, that deserves a big round of applause. And I know we have a delegation here from Puerto Rico, right, Randy? They're there somewhere. Mi gente de Puerto Rico, que bien, los quiero, los amo. And the other thing that we have done with the AFT is work very closely around immigrant rights, particularly the well-being of our children and families that are immigrants. And unfortunately on that front and so many other causes, we've had to be unrelentingly busy. It is depressing to say that President Trump has been in office for nearly a year and a half now. I took a couple of aspirins when I was writing that down, and it's like, geez, it's been a year and a half. But the fact is that the intervening weeks and months have been the most challenging, discouraging, and dangerous in the last 4 decades of American history. Guided by unbridled extremism, President Trump's time in office has been characterized by assaults on the very values and ideals our institutions were founded on. The values of diversity, inclusion, fairness, education, and opportunity for all. Let's take the issue of immigration, and I know that's been weighing heavily on the minds of so many of us here in this room. Donald Trump, the candidate, campaigned on a platform of baseless, incendiary, and hateful anti-immigrant rhetoric, and President Trump has attempted almost daily to turn that rhetoric into reality. Those are the facts. Starting with his infamous Muslim ban, President Trump has launched draconian measures that have forced immigrants into a state of fear in our country. His administration has indiscriminately deported tens of thousands of hardworking residents from our nation, stripped the rights of our dreamers to stay in the only country they have ever known, and ordered the end of temporary protective status for hundreds of thousands of Nicaraguans, Haitians, Hondurans, Nepalese, Sudanese, and Salvadorians. There's a pattern there, right? When we mention those countries, there's a pattern there. Overall, this administration's policies are targeted attacks on immigrants whose religion and skin color are offensive to this president and his cabinet members. Yet despite these outrages, as Randy said, we struggle to convey the sheer inhumanity of his so-called zero-tolerance policy. The better-named Trump family separation and incarceration policies have put into practice the forcible separation of children from their parents at the border. It is one thing to intercept undocumented immigrants, process them according to international norms, and return them to their countries of origin. It is an entirely different thing to criminally prosecute these immigrants, imprison them, and then seize their children. The reality of government-sanctioned child separations is, as Randy said, horrific, atrocious, abominable. We can come up with other words, but it's just awful what our country, our government has been doing. We have a White House today that felt it was okay to institute a government-sanctioned, basically sanctioned child abuse. A federal administration willing to condone the psychological torture of little children to carry out its xenophobic agenda. Since Trump's family separation policy was announced in April, thousands of children, along them toddlers and infants, have been separated from their parents' arm and placed in child detention centers. And we actually don't know the exact number, right? Some of the numbers that are being reported are 3,000, some as high as 10,000. We just don't know. It is a shocking, shocking assault on international norms, on human rights, protection against torture, and treatment of children. Not to mention a total abandonment of basic morality, basic decency and humanity. And again, you stole some of my talking points, Randy, but we are not talking about North Korea here. We are talking about the United States government in 2018. The United States government in 2018, which is why we were so grateful to have joined the AFT at the United Nations to file that complaint with the UN Commission on Human Rights, and why we were at the border in Tornillo, Texas, to protest and bring attention to these detention facilities where our children are being kept. There are a lot of stories that are being written about what these children are forced to do in these detention centers. They're cleaning bathrooms, for Christ's sake, right? They're being told when to eat and how to eat. They can't hug their loved ones. It's insane. As if all this weren't enough, the Trump administration has carried out these family separations, incarcerations, without bothering to keep adequate records of family units. Which children belong to whom, the parents of the children that have been detained, and vice versa. So let that sink in for a minute. Our government not only separated children, but then we didn't keep records of where we were placing them. We didn't keep records of where we were placing their parents. That's how much our government doesn't care. That's the cruelty, in fact, of this government. And as you may have read recently, there was a court order that was forcing this government to say there are over 100 kids that you have detained that are under 5 years old. You need to reunite them with their families right now. Well, our government hasn't been able to do so, and it hasn't been able to do so because they don't know where their parents are. They just don't know, right? It's just amazing, right? And the parents that are being detained by our federal government are also being forced to pay exorbitant bail bond payments that they can ill afford, right? Just this week, we had to pay $35,000 to get 3 Guatemalan women who were at 26 Federal Plaza in New York released from custody. It's $35,000, right? $35,000. So that's over $10,000 per detainee, right? Immigrants obviously cannot afford that. Just to reunite with their children. The Trump administration is also telling many of the detained parents that they will have to pay $800, get this, $800 for DNA testing to prove that these are their children. The same government that stripped them of the documents they brought with them, right, to prove that these are their children. It is really just unbelievable what's happening. I sort of call it Kafkaesque. For those of you that watch The Handmaid's Tale, right, on Hulu, that show is so gripping and so scary because a version of that is playing out today in America today, in 2018. A version of that show is playing out today in America. So, I promise it's not going to be all doom and gloom here. So where do we go from here? What's important to remember, and I get so much power from this room, it's important to remember that we are not powerless. Our resistance, in fact, is strong and making a difference. The fact that this administration had to sort of stumble itself and say, oh, we're not doing that, and try to change and say, well, we're no longer doing that. We're going into permanent family incarceration now. But nevertheless, the fact that they had to sort of, take back sort of, again, these children separations is a testament to the fact that all of you in this room and so many others said, no, nunca más en este país se va a ocurrir algo así. So we said no, and that's why they had to walk back. And none of us are sitting on the sidelines, and none of us are fighting alone. The shared experience of coming under attack from the White House has strengthened the bonds that unite us. Organized labor, grassroots advocates, people of color, women, immigrants, the working classes, religious minorities, and the LGBTQ community understand that it is one shared struggle, right? We are not talking about any longer, oh, this is our movement, or this is our movement, or this is our movement. It is one movement for social justice. And the only way that we overcome is by working together. Thank you. So we have made common cause with each other and other Americans who feel similarly that something is fundamentally un-American about this administration. In trying to divide us, this administration has compelled us to hold tightly to one another even more so. We now face a difficult road before us, but we also know that our families and communities are resilient and that by working together we can turn the tide. I am especially inspired by Randy and Mary Catherine's and Loretta's leadership and everything that the AFT is doing. I look around this room, as I mentioned before, and I see educators, I see nurses, I see healthcare professionals, and I see amazing labor leaders, and it grants me great hope. Your commitment to social justice, to our cause, your love of our children, it fills our movement with a fountain of hope. And you know what? We are going to prevail. We are going to prevail because we care, we fight, we show up, and we vote. And when we do that together, everything is possible. When we do that together, everything is possible. Sí se puede, familia. Siempre juntos, sí se puede. Thank you, AFT. Thank you, Randy. Thank you.
We have a guest from Canada who wants to give us some greetings. As that guest comes up, I also want to bring up, just for recognition, the Rosa Soto Thomas of St. Croix and Carol Callwood of St. Thomas. They too, from the Virgin Islands, they too have gone through tremendous hardship this year. These are two of our amazing locals, and I just want the body to recognize them and for them to be recognized. I don't know if you want to say a word or two, but before they say a word or two, as we bring up human rights, what we're doing, if I can get through them, is human rights, RNs and healthcare workers, and probably we're going to get through those two, and then we'll start with higher ed tomorrow, and we'll also try to do the Kavanaugh resolution if we can. But what I wanted to do, because I neglected it before, was on constitutional amendments to say thank you to Don Carlisto, who was chair, and Mary Best, who was the recording secretary. On labor and the economy, say thank you to Seth Capo and Annette Sofrer, who was the chair and the recording secretaries. To organizing and collective bargaining, saying thank you to Philippe Abraham and to Jacinta Tucker from the Ohio Nurses Association, and this last committee to say thank you to Paul Egan and Linnea Atkinson from the Jefferson County AFT. It is a thankless job to be the chair and the recording secretaries of committees, and I just wanted to say thank you. Do you two want to just say a word about what has happened?
Good afternoon, everyone. I bring you greetings from St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm Rosa Soto Thomas. I'm the president of, and the first female elected president in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands. I bring you greetings from the executive board, the entire membership, the representative council of the St. Croix Federation of Teachers. We're most happy and gracious to receive all the assistance from the affiliates, everyone who called, extended themselves. The members are so happy. I want to thank Randy especially and her team, Loretta, Mary Catherine, Tanya Cornell, who's over the southern region, George Bourdonnais, who came during the storm, right after the storm. And we didn't have housing, so I got him lodging on St. Croix at my girlfriend's house because I lost a portion of my roof. And as we speak, my roof is being fixed. I left my husband behind, who usually attends the conferences with me. So he's there making sure that everything is in order, but I'm anxious to get back home. You know, they may forget something, so you know how we are as women. So I'm anxious to get back home. I'm also eager for things to return to normal, especially in the schools, because for the entire year and months following the storm, our students only receive 4 hours of instructional time, 4 hours. And we have 8 elementary schools, 3 junior high schools, and 2 high schools. And we were forced to operate out of 5 buildings, 5 buildings. So that's not good. Students, definitely education was compromised. And a lot of our teachers, younger folks, we lost to the United States because of the challenges. And we also have challenges with our annuity system in the Virgin Islands. And we're currently in negotiations. And that's a challenge too, because the government never have money for educators. That sounds familiar? Yes, so we're continuing, Sister Carol and I, we're continuing the fight. We pretty much got, I believe, a decent offer for the teachers and the professional unit of our local, but we're still battling to get the PSRP, something that's palatable to me as the leader, and we haven't arrived there yet. So that's the struggle. So I'm asking for your prayers and your continued support, and thank all of you for all the camaraderie and support that you continue to give to us in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rose has basically conveyed most of what I wanted to say. We thank everyone for all your prayers and for the donations by the national and for many of the affiliates, especially my sisters in Nishamini and brothers and sisters in Nishamini for sending what we needed the most, and for everyone else who has willingly and wholeheartedly submitted some form of assistance to us. One of the things I do want to acknowledge, some of you may have seen or heard my comment about trying not to forget us, because in the wake of hurricane aftermath, you heard Puerto Rico in the national media, and even sometimes from national AFT. But I want you to know, Irma was the first storm, and she devastated St. Thomas. But our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, 2 days after Irma, violated all kinds of laws and sent supplies and commodities over to us in speedboats and anything going to make sure we had what we needed when Irma damaged us. Our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico took in our ill from St. Thomas. When we had critical patients that could not be taken care of in St. Thomas, they were evacuated to the hospitals in Puerto Rico. So a week later, when Maria came visiting, she damaged Puerto Rico. So all of the assistance that we were being offered by Puerto Rico was taken away, and our hearts went to them. But with all of the attention going to Puerto Rico, they kind of forgot about us. We are little, we are smaller, but we are still here. And we do appreciate everything that everyone has done for us. Muchas gracias, mi amor, de Puerto Rico. But please, do not forget about the U.S. Virgin Islands, because we still have challenges. And we have one more challenge in St. Thomas that so far St. Croix may not have yet. St. Thomas, St. John district I represent. In St. John, Bloomberg and his friends have basically offered or have provided scholarships for all of our local children from our public school to attend the private school Gift Hill, when most of the students who were there before were relocated back to their mainland homes. The local students were given scholarships to attend the private school. So it basically emptied out the public school. So when parents had a choice, double session in the public school or scholarship to the private school, full day school, they went. It was supposed to be an offering for just one semester, and in February, they said, you have to pay. But when they realized that they were going to go back to public school in February because they weren't going to be able to pay, they put out a campaign, and they have funded the scholarships for our local children to attend Gift Hill Private School until 2019. That is one step into privatizing our education system in the island, and we are not going to allow that. So that's going to be a fight that we're going to be taking on shortly, and I'm going to be calling on everyone to offer us some support in that. But thank you for everything else that you've already done for us.
Thank you, Randy, brothers and sisters, colleagues. Randy, if I knew you were going to ask me to come here, I would have worn a nicer jacket. My name is Mark Ramsanker. I'm the president of the Canadian Teachers Federation. Two weeks ago, an event happened that we believed in Canada was very historic, compelled me to write a letter to your president. I knew I was going to be attending this assembly, so rather than mail it, I wanted to come and hand deliver it in person so that you knew how important this issue is to Canadian teachers. I wanted to read it to you today. Dear Randy, on behalf of close to 250,000 members of the Canadian Teachers Federation, I would like to convey our staunch support for the American Federation of Teachers as a result of the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Janus versus American Federation of State, Country, and Municipal Employees. This ruling is yet another affront to democracy. Since November 2016, we, north of the border, have watched with dismay the incremental and insidious attacks by the Trump administration on your democratic rights. Although the ruling was made by the Supreme Court, we are fully aware that the players' intent on silencing the union movement's voice covered Janus's legal costs tied to the case. American political scientist Larry Diamond has said that democracy consists of the following four key elements: a political system for choosing and replacing the government through free and fair elections, the active participation of people as citizens in political and civic life, protection of human rights of all citizens, and finally, the rule of law in which the laws and procedures apply equally to all citizens. We believe strongly the Trump administration is intentionally breaching all of these elements. We stand in full solidarity with you and your members. Not only do we share your borders with you, we share your belief in a strong and united teachers union, and our voices, along with yours, will not be silenced nor diminished. You can count on the Canadian Teachers Federation to support you in your struggle as you stand for your democratic rights of your students, your schools, your members, and your community. Yours in solidarity, Mark Ramsanker. I will also say this was my first time at the mic here. And I bear witness, I marched with you yesterday, and I've listened to the debate that's been going on. It makes me proud to be a Canadian teacher and a member of a union. Stay strong.